I think what we are really aware of is that when we start using these kind of processes, that 10x processes and model, we actually take authority over our own lives in a way that can be kind of really exponentially greater. Each time that we do that, we give ourselves a gift.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to episode 3 of the 10X podcast with Gene and I. And today we're going to do something that sets the foundation for everything that you experience in the 10X model, but also in your life. I mean, think about it from this question, that what if you can experience 10X growth with everything, every situation, or every experience that you have in life? Imagine some things happen, but you learn to process, you learn to think about those situations and experiences in your life in a way that will create exponential growth for you. Isn't that amazing? Wouldn't that be something brilliant? And that's what today is going to be about. Because today, as the title obviously suggests, that today is going to be the session on the art of self-reflection. And why does this set as a foundation for the 10x model or the 10x program? Because the way we reflect and the way we process allows us to embody what we experience. So there are lots of thoughts, lots of ideas, lots of knowledge, lots of concepts, but how do we turn that into something that's impactful for us? How do we experience growth from that? How do we turn that into something that can give us results, the next experience out of it? Helps us step into the next identity, helps us step into our essential self. So all of that, and the foundation to that is coming from how do you reflect? And the way you reflect, there is actually a process to that. There is a structure to that. And that's what we're going to speak about today. But in the way that you reflect makes a huge difference in the way that you experience life. And so it's not just about using this in 10x model. What we're going to do today is actually impactful for everywhere in life or for anything and everything. But that's also, like we said, the 10x model is everywhere and anywhere in life. So it's sort of like interrelated anyway.
Yep. Sounds good. So, where do we go from here?
Yeah. I mean, so we could make a great start, because I think the idea of this session came from because when I asked Gene the question, where does the idea of the 10x model comes from? And I think that's where the response for Gene was. It was in the way that I self-reflect. So maybe we can unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
Would you like to share a little bit about that, Gene?
Yeah, I think that's great. It was a real insight prior to we got on the podcast to realize that when people had asked me that question before, where did it come from? I would typically answer with content, and that was kind of like the language came from my Silicon Valley days and came from an experience that I had, and I realized that my whole life, from the point at which, particularly the point at which my dad died when I was 12, had been filled with 10x experiences, but I didn't have language or concepts to deal with that. And I realized that where the model itself came from is the articulation of a way of seeing the world, of dealing with the world. And it comes from having experience, but then, as we're talking about, having self-reflection on the experience. And I think about, particularly in terms of the 10x model itself, there are several things that immediately come to mind. One is, and I've mentioned this as one of my favorites, is that the first time that I went to Europe, it was 12 weeks, a 12-week study tour, fell in love with Europe, and I had this vision of wanting to live and work in Europe. And there was no kind of rationality to that. That was his total emotional response to the overwhelming nature of that experience. But what I didn't then did was I reflected on it. And I think that's really where the model itself came from, was that I've had many experiences, as we all do. We know this because we've done these programs, and everybody has 10x experiences where they exceed their expectations and it surprises them. And this one certainly surprised me, that I had this vision about wanting to live and work in Europe, and there was just something that called me. There was like a it was like an emotional response, and one of the ways I think about that is what I call living art. I remember being in New York City and going to the Museum of Modern Art with a friend and just going, "Wow." I mean, there were art, paintings particularly that just kind of drew me in, and I had a response to them, but I didn't have a rationality about it, and I just thought, "Man, that is what art is. Art is something that can give a sense of life to us that is not rational in its essence. It's something beyond that." But what the self-reflection part was realizing very much like with going to Europe and thinking about how do I take NLP to Europe was how does this work? And so I realized that it had to do with stepping back, kind of going into a meta position and reflecting and saying, where else in my life do I have this experience of that kind of life-giving aspect of um, the experience I had in the museum in New York and that I had in going to Europe, which was similar kind of feeling. And I realized that there was this kind of pattern, if you will. And of course, you know, we're very much about structure. And it's like, you know, a pattern is structure through time. And so if you start to look across context, you start to say, where else do I have this feeling? And discover that that feeling is prominent in many places, in relationships with friends and family, in inspirational times, in being able to do certain things. You know, like I was a basketball player. I mean, there were certain games I played that were absolute art, not as anything to be arrogant about, just simply as the beauty of the flow of being in flow of the game of basketball. And so I was like, okay, there's these multiple contexts where I had this experience. You know, what is that all about? And my conclusion when I was taking this step back and reflecting was it really is about exponential growth. So, in other words, having this experience of life-giving experiential examples, that was reflecting on something in the past. But what if I applied that to the present and the future? And so that combined with a bunch of other things I would say is really the source of articulating the 10X model, not of creating it. I think it somehow spontaneously it was part of my life because I knew, you know, when my dad died, I knew I had to get out of that black hole that I felt I was in. And it took me quite a while, but it was a motivation to create an exponential lifestyle.
Mhm.
And I think that's true for all of us is that when we have that life-giving experience, when we feel ourselves more fully energized by the experience. And when we are able to do that with others and for others, life becomes so much richer. And part of what the 10X model is all about is actually creating an exponential lifestyle so that our lives are richer and so that the effect and impact we have gets extended beyond our own interests, beyond our own present moment into the lives of other people. So that was a real insight for me today. I'm very pleased to have gotten that. And I think that
Yeah.
we're going to explore that. What does that look like, that self reflection?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so one of the things that I also understand and that I get out of this is that, you know, self, your ability to reflect or your ability to create self reflection really helps you ground or embody your experience.
Mm.
Uh, like a metaphor comes to mind, and I don't know if it's an accurate metaphor because somehow the metaphor of cooking comes to mind, but I'm not I don't know how to cook very well. But imagine that I do learn to cook and I do cook, but I never pause to kind of like, you know, like you said, that take a step back, take a step into meta position and kind of go like, okay, what worked here? What didn't work here? What did this actually mean when I did this? What did it actually mean when I created this? Has this worked in the past? because if I know that it's worked in the past, then I know that it can work in the future. Imagine if I don't do any of it, that would mean I'll just do whatever I do and then things will just happen. So reflection is really a great way to kind of pause and embody experience.
Mm.
And one of the great ways to do that is, I mean, this would be one of the structure that you're going to practice today as well. So you can make a note of the question, which is what Gene asked himself, that, okay, where else is this experience true in your life? So when you have something that's impactful for you, when you have something that's meaningful, when you have an experience that's life changing, you can kind of pause and reflect on where else is this true? And that taps into what we would call it in NLP as identification, that taps into recognizing the pattern. You can also unpack the question of where is this coming from? And that is a great sort of beginning point to create the self reflection for yourself. And of course,
Mhm.
there's so much more to it, but this is definitely one of the steps that you can begin with.
It's a great start. I mean, if you think about it and you go, okay, for example, just as a way to kind of jump into the 10x model part of this, um, think about memories and experiences that have exceeded your expectation. Maybe make a list of 3 or 4 or 5, right? And the feeling that goes with those memories, and you go, okay, right. So there's something particular about that that really gives life, because I think that's essential to the 10x model is that you get, and then go, okay, now having had that feeling, how do I generate that feeling in the moment and into my future? What is characteristic of we're talking about the structure of that pattern. What's characteristic of that? What was the cause and what aspects, what factors involved in having those experiences? All of that says that you have the structure of exponential growth because that's what those few experiences represent is exponential growth. You have that. And to your question, Nishith, what if I could make that a regular part of my life? Right. And so it became just a way of being to go, oh, okay, I can really create that now. And the thing about that is one of the things we understand is how we approach our everyday experience is up to us. We can approach it in just a kind of casual, ordinary way and very, oh, well, it's just every day, not particularly extraordinary. Or we can, I mean, that's one end of the extreme. The other end of the extreme is approach it from, okay, what's going to make it special? What in this ordinary everyday life moment could take it beyond that into an exponential life giving expression? And so being able to do that. So I know that many people, for example, I have a client who just gets life from being in nature. He lives on the beach and goes walking on the beach and goes swimming on a daily basis and has discovered that nature for him is absolutely life-giving. But for a long time, he did not realize he was in control of that and that he could actually when he didn't live on the beach, he didn't realize that going to the beach was where he found his energy for his life. And when he moved to the beach, he found that he did. And he said, okay, that choice to move to the beach and to live in a beach setting was really a example of his agency for creating an exponential lifestyle. And we can do that in the ordinary, just like he did that. And that's a little bit more than ordinary, but we can do that. And so it becomes a matter of seeing what's possible and going, "Oh, I can really make this something special." And I think that's one of the things that 10x model will enables us to do. And that self-reflection is a way of doing this. Say like, "Okay, what is it about the experience, about the structure of the experience that makes it special?"
Yeah. Great. So part of the process when we can unpack and everyone can practice is also to sort of explore the question that how can those life-giving experiences that you've had, how is that true in a day-to-day life, or how can you create that through self-reflection on a daily life
Hmm.
as well? Would that be an accurate thing to say?
Yeah, yeah, it would. And I would say, for example, uh, the question is the question I ask is, I'm having this experience and it's a great experience. What is this an example of? Right.
Mm,
So, and that question is a question asking for what is the pattern here? You know, so when I get an answer, it's a more conceptual answer to so you're linking experience with concept. You
mhm,
get that concept. So life giving is an answer to, going to the museum and seeing art, going to Europe and deciding to live there, my client going to live on the beach. And so what is an example of life giving is the answer at a conceptual level. But then the question is, okay, given that these examples I have are life giving, what are other contexts where I could have the same experience? And what would be necessary in order to have that experience? So that's where you get to finding out what's the cause of this. Is like, how do I have to show up in order to have the experience that I just had in these 3 to 5 examples of 10x?
mhm.
And there are many different ways in which you can define that. But asking that question, what is this an example of? Finding the answer to that question and saying, where are other examples like this? And then generating opportunities to have, to find yourself in those other contexts where those examples are real and you exceed your expectations there. That is a real core to the 10x process.
Right. Ah, so we could, in terms of the like a little bit of structure of self-reflection, we could summarize this into maybe like these three questions. We can even title this the three questions to self-reflection.
Right.
When you do have an experience, anyway, I think it's a great title.
Yeah, it's good.
uh,
It's good. It's good.
when you have a experience, you kind of pause, and one of the questions, the first question, as a beginning point, could be that okay, where is this coming from, and where else is this true? So that creates a little bit of identification. Then to
I would say that the first question is, what is this an example of? Rather than where's it coming from? Because where's it coming from is still can be a bit diffuse. But
Mm,
if you say, what is this an example of? At least in my world, that it works.
yeah. So we could, so then I was bringing that as a second question, but we can have that as a first question. So when you have an experience, then you could begin with what is this an example of? Now, for those of you who've learned NLP, you would know this is a chunking question. So it's like chunking up. So you understand how you're defining this experience for yourself
Yeah.
when you have an
Right.
experience, and
Right.
how can you unpack that for yourself. And once you have a sort of meaning or the definition of that experience for yourself, then it's easy to work with it, process it, replicate it,
Mhm.
embody it, change it. But if you don't have that, then you haven't really processed it. It's just something that happens and you
Yeah.
moved on it. And
Yeah.
I mean, some stuff will happen unconsciously, but nothing consciously, and nothing by design or by choice. So
Right.
that's one of the great ways to kind of then create that self-reflection. Where else is it true?
Mhm. Yeah.
Or go to the
Or where else could it either where else is it true or where else could it be true? In other words, if you're going to go future, you can say, where could it be true? If you want to go past, where else is it true? But both of those questions work.
yeah. So then that could be the second question in terms of where else is it true? Where else could it be true? And then
Yep.
that could give you an experience of maybe recognizing deeper structure, deeper pattern. And of course,
Mhm.
if you're NLP trained, you know what that means. If you haven't, I would highly recommend that you do an NLP course for sure.
And do it with Nishith.
And do absolutely. If NLP is a great way, I think, to go to deeper structure, and that's part of self reflection.
Yeah.
It's part
Yeah.
of recognizing what's going on with us and what do we want to do with it.
Yeah,
And that's
that's
what I
right.
was going to bring as a third question. That once I recognize that what is this experience an example of, and then where else is this true, what do I do with that?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. That's exactly right.
So,
And that's how that really is that's a core question because it's the essence of creating a 10x outcome. Because if you think about 10x outcomes at whatever level, they could be very much an interaction or it could be, a vision of 30 years or whatever. Asking that question is a way of orienting our minds toward creating a 10x outcome. And of course, then you have to act on it. But
yeah,
once you define it and can move toward it, you are in the process of generating 10x outcomes. And those outcomes are life-giving. I mean, it's one of the things I like about the model is for me, every time I'm successful with a 10x outcome, I just feel such a release of energy and excitement and vitality. And that is, I think, what we all long for is to live a life that is full and has that vitality in it. And this is a way to get there.
yeah. So I would say like as a side quest within the frame of the 10x model, one of the things that you can also then explore is that what are some of the experiences that are life giving for you?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's almost like then chunking down. So we do the other way around where you can like,
That's
okay,
right.
what are the example of those life giving experiences for you?
Yeah.
And the more you unpack, the more you can connect with them, and the more you can live them on a daily basis.
Yeah. Yeah, and the beauty of the chunking model, like you're talking about, in that chunking down question of, what are examples of other life-giving experiences I have, is that we make it we increase our agency by recognizing the pattern and saying, I can chunk down and find other examples. I can chunk up and define the meaning of that. But really, I can, once I've got the meaning and the pattern, can choose, that's agency. I can choose to create those experiences in my life. And that is X model on steroids, right? That's really where it goes because what we're saying is that the model itself is just it's a framework or it's a means of accessing our essential self and expressing that essential self, which is coming out of the very essence of who we are and what we value and what's important to us.
Yeah. Great. So I feel that from today's episode, from today's session, this could be the two sort of good practices to have. This could be the two great exercises to follow. So I would put it as like the main quest, and the main quest is that you step more and more into the art of self-reflection. And many
Yeah.
of you might already be doing this, but here's like a structure to it. So you can think about like maybe 3 to 5 experiences in a day, tomorrow, day after, for the next week, and ask yourself, just pause for a moment and ask yourself the question that, okay, what is this experience an example of? So it could be as simple as, let's say, I live in Bangalore, so I relate to traffic. Many of you might not understand the concept of traffic till you come to Bangalore. You might think what traffic is, but not till you come to Bangalore. But imagine uh, I'm driving and then there's a lot of traffic and it's creating this experience of a little bit of stress or a little bit of frustration. And so that's a great place to kind of just pause and go like, okay, what is this experience an example of?
Mm.
And then once you kind of unpack that for yourself, you can go to the next section. Okay. So if I'm in this situation, which is traffic for me, and traffic is content here, but if this situation is what's creating this experience of frustration, then it could be true in other areas of my life. So where else is this true? Where else is this true for me? And then I can start to see a pattern. I can start to recognize a pattern within what's happening for me. Uh, and then what do I want to do with those insights? Obviously, for me in this case, the outcome would be to change my experience of being in traffic. So it doesn't, when you're working with this, it doesn't have to be something extraordinary or something big. It could be as a practice, you can follow this process, 3-step process with many experiences to just get into the habit or the art of self-reflection. And that could be the main quest. And then the side
Yes.
quest is within the frame of 10x model to kind of go like, okay, what are some of the experiences in your life that are life giving for
Yeah.
you, that are exciting for you, and what are some of the examples of those experiences? And then you can just relate to it, and you can even recognize this in your day to day life, because there are so many things in my day to day life that are life giving for me. At this point, it's like playing guitar. I really enjoy it. It's life giving for me. So in your day to
Mm.
day life, you would have experiences, and if you don't kind of pause to reflect on them, then they just pass by. So you
Yeah.
could post like I make a journal of it or audit it. What are your life giving experiences, day to day life?
Yeah. Yeah. And, the thing about that is, I think what we are really aware of is that when we start using these kind of processes, that 10x processes and model, we actually take authority over our own lives in a way that can be kind of really exponentially greater. Each time that we do that, we give ourselves a gift. And I think that that's really very powerful, is that we don't have to wait for the external world to give us something. We can actually give ourselves these things that brings life and energy and vitality to us. And when we give that to ourselves, we also are giving it to others because it kind of overflows. And so that is part of the beauty of the whole model.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Amazing. So I guess that's about it for today. Anything else that you'd like to add?
No, no, I'm glad that we could talk about this because it really brings it to the fore as a key component of the 10x model.
Yeah. Great. So just to reiterate, do your main quest, do your side quest for the week. And as usual, share your experiences with us wherever you're watching, either on comments or connect with us on LinkedIn, and you can share your experiences with us and have fun doing this process and have fun self reflecting. And maybe you can take a moment to pause after this podcast and reflect on your experience of this episode in itself. Start now. So you can enjoy the process, do that, and then we'll see you again very soon. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for
it was
joining us
good.
today.
Thank you.